So we will now transition to the first panel. And first of all, I would like to apologize. We have been notified that in the platform that the audience was using, there were some streaming challenges and some quality issues. So we don't see this in the platform that we use for the speakers. So on behalf of Forum Europe, I would like to apologize for that. And I believe you have all received now a link on YouTube, which hopefully should fix the problem while the other platform gets rectified. So we will now transition to our first panel, and as we said at the outset, data. So sovereign AI in public sector, value of interconnected data spaces. So I would like first of all to welcome to the stage our distinguished panelists. So I would like to start with Andrea Halmos, Deputy Head of Unit Interoperability at DigiDigit in the European Commission. Hi, Andrea, and welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
We then have Florian Pappenberger, Deputy Director General and Director of Forecasts at the Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasts, or known in European jargon as ECMWF. Since you have a very long appellation, Florian, welcome. We then have Elsa Castro, member of the Board of Directors from the Agency for Administrative Modernization of Portugal. Thank you so much, Elsa, for being with us. We then have Wouter Welling, Manager for Digital Inclusion, Data and AI, Digital Society Department at the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations of the Government of the Netherlands. Welcome, Wouter.
Thank you.
Pepe Bjerring, EMEA Business Development Manager, AI Platform Solutions at HPE. We have a further speaker that will join us in really a few minutes. I will already introduce him. He was caught up in the meeting. We have Anthony Rietel, the plenipotentiary of the Minister of Education and Science for Digital Transformation. And Anthony is also Deputy Director of GovTech Poland. So first of all, again, a very warm welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for being with us today and helping us understand what do we do with the data that we need to bring them up to a quality and that is actually required to train the AI models. So to start unpacking this, we will start actually with the AI strategies of the various member states. And we heard also from Soren that there has been a pretty dramatic acceleration in the work on these AI strategies. And so maybe, Wouter, I would start with you. If you could give us, at this stage, just maybe a very preliminary overview of what you guys are working. We'll look at use cases later on, but just to understand what are the main streams you're working on, what are your milestones, and then Elsa, if you could come in commenting from your perspective, since you are from the Portuguese Administration Modernization Agency, and it would be interesting to hear from you what is your role in accelerating AI adoption and what are your plans of your organization. So Wouter, I would actually start with you if that's okay.
That's okay, Irina. Thank you for having me. Well, let me explain the situation in the Netherlands. I'm calling in from The Hague. And in the Netherlands, we had several cabinet-wide sessions on AI policy and AI strategies. So the whole cabinet in the room, because we really decided that this is a systemic disruptive technology that changes all aspects of society. And that meant that it was not something that could be dealt with in, for example, my ministry, the Ministry of the Interior, or the Ministry of Economic Affairs, or the Ministry of Justice, or the Ministry of Safety. This is something that is disruptive for the whole of government. That's the first thing our cabinet realized, and they're now coming together to discuss this on recurring occasions. In July, we had the first broad policy letter on AI, and we are currently working at an extra policy letter, which is also shared by the whole of government, which is a vision on generative AI and use in society. Because we really decided this is a different point where a specific vision is needed of what the impact will be. And I think the basis is that the promise of I'm hearing some strange noise in my headphones, but the promise of unlimited compute power and releasing unprecedented forms of data processing power, that is something that really changed also the way how we govern a society, because this goes through all policy departments. And I think the base of the strategy in the Netherlands is that we must do this in a value-driven manner. So what we do is we decided that first the values that you want to assure in society should be decided on, and then we decide, okay, if we are focusing on human rights or economic opportunities or equality or democracy, what should then be the things we should assure when adopting this new technology? Because I think in the Netherlands, there's one thing is clear: we can't hold this back or completely abandon it in general, but we need to set clear what is the society we want to have in a few years, and what does it need in terms of guardrails to do this in a responsible manner. Let me give one example. I was at the AI summit in the UK a few weeks ago, and the Netherlands had strong points on value-driven innovation and how we are active in the EU level, for example, on the AI Act policy negotiations. And we spoke a lot about privacy, about authorship, about sensitive data. And what I was struck by was the discussions we had with some, let's say, rising countries, for example, from Africa. And what we know is that, for example, in the Department of Health, when it comes to radiologists, they were describing, look, the Netherlands, you have a lot of radiologists in your country. It's easy to be value-driven. But for us, this means opportunities for improving the lives of citizens. And we think privacy comes next. And I think that's the difficult challenge Europe has, that we are at a level of economic progress that we have the luxury to discuss these kind of things, but we must be aware that in most parts of the world, things that offer better quality of life will always come first. And I think that's the difficulty we have in the Netherlands, to discuss all these balances of geopolitics, human rights, economic opportunities, and human safety. Let me leave it to that.
Great. No, thank you, Wouter. Very relevant. And first of all, very interesting what you said about this being a full cabinet topic, which is, I think, the right way to go. And it's very, very relevant what you indicated on how your government already understood that this transformation will be underpinning any sector and aspect of society. And second thing that I thought is really noteworthy, as you say, we can't hold the AI revolution, but we need to make sure we channel it to the right objective. So very interesting thoughts. And Esa, do you want to comment on the role of your agency of administrative modernization in this debate?
Yes, thank you, Irina. Thank you for having me. I would like to start by greeting my fellow panelists and thank you for the invitation to be part of this discussion, which we are having at a good time. So the agency is the national entity in Portugal that is responsible for the modernization and digital transformation of the public sector. So we are focused on developing policies and tools for a better digital public sector. And the agency is under the Secretary of State for Digitalization and Administrative Modernization, which sits directly under the Prime Minister, and is therefore able to assume a cross-cutting role that reaches all areas of government and set the pace. So AI is still uncharted territory in many aspects, and the discussions around this topic is starting. We have already some pilot projects using AI, but as we assume this cross-cutting role, we can set the pace. The agency leads the National ICT Council, which sets the overall public administration digital strategy, and we work on guidelines for the development of public sectors, of public services. For instance, we've recently developed a common framework for designing and developing digital public services, this framework, which is displayed on a website, provides a set of principles and best practices and tools for the design of development of user-friendly and efficient and accessible digital public services. And also, the agency is responsible for national key portals, such as Public Services Single Portal, which is called ePortugal, is a single entry point for public services, and the Open Data Portal, data.gov. Also, we develop fundamental building blocks that are used across all public sector, such as electronic identification and interoperability. So we can ensure that stakeholders have the right tools to improve their digital systems and ensure a common standard for the services that we provide to citizens and businesses. So we have here a main role on setting the pace and developing tools and setting the pace for the discussion.
Great, thank you, Elsa. And it's great to hear that you ultimately report into the Prime Minister's office as well, so that equally you can cascade your policies across all ministries and departments. And we will come back, because I know that you have developed a very interesting pilot, and we'll come to that, and we'll look at this more deeply into the use cases section. But you actually mentioned interoperability, and this is actually one of the topics that I really wanted to have a deeper look into, and how interoperability will play an ever increasingly important role, also in light of gaining these efficiencies and allowing AI models to perform at their best. And so in this context, Andrea, first of all, I would like to congratulate you on successfully concluding the Interoperable Europe Act. DigiDigit has played, for sure, a critical role in digitization of public sector, and you have been leading now also discussions on AI, and we're grateful because several times Digit participated to our public sector conference. So I would like to ask you, Andrea, can you tell us a bit more about the Interoperable Europe Act, and how will this interplay with the, what we all want, acceleration of AI uptake in the public sector?
Indeed, the Interoperable Europe Act was, the negotiations have recently concluded. We're obviously still finalizing the text, but very soon, most likely beginning of next year, everybody will be able to read it, and it soon after enters into force. It actually has brought about quite a number of changes, which we also hope will have an impact on how data will be managed and governed in the context of public services and data-driven decision making, and hopefully will also facilitate the use of AI. It brings forward a strengthened collaboration between the public sector entities at level of member states, but also lower levels of government, and also among EU institutions and bodies, because the Act is applicable to all public administrations in the EU. And puts forward the idea to actually have a check, a so-called interoperability assessment check, each time a new public service or a significantly altered public service is to be created. So that check has to be done prior to binding decisions in a case when that public service would rely on cross-border data exchange. So that's is going to really, we believe, create a new kind of a mindset whereby the interoperability aspects and obviously digital aspects are considered from a very early stage on. It also puts forward the idea of strengthening the idea of sharing and reusing interoperability solutions. So what it really means for the use of AI, and we've indeed been looking at how to foster AI in the public sector. Obviously, there's the overall AI strategy coordinated plan and so on, but we also believe that for the public sector, there needs to be some very specific conditions in order to really play a leading role in complying with human-centric use of emerging technologies, such as put forward by the Berlin Declaration, amongst others. So we've been collecting use cases. We now have a big database of over 800 use cases in Europe using AI in the context of public services. And we continue to help further innovation. So the Act puts forward also a strong emphasis on innovation measures that will include, for example, regulatory sandboxes for interoperability solutions. We also have some funding and supporting activities for so-called GovTech incubators and pilots, which can and will, of course, use also AI for the creation of public services. And what we also would like to see with this is, because of this focus on reuse, we would like to see, obviously, reusable solutions put forward for AI-enabled services and decisions as well.
Great, thank you, Andrea, very much. And we will continue discussing on interoperability also later on. But again, this is one of the critical challenges that European Union has still from a cross-border perspective, and an enormous amount of work has been done and progress with the European data spaces already. And later on, we'll see how this could or should evolve to, let's say, offer even larger data sets for the AI models. But I would like to take the opportunity now to welcome Anthony Rietl to the stage. So he was in a meeting, and so Anthony, thank you so much for carving out time and joining us. And Anthony, before we move on, we already started the conversation on the national AI strategies and from a macro perspective. And we heard from Wouter and Elsa that both the Dutch and the Portuguese governments are looking at cross-ministerial strategies. So could you tell us a little bit more about the Polish initiatives, what you are working on? That could be very helpful and informative for our audience.
Right. So first of all, thanks for having me. I do apologize for having to run a couple of minutes late. However, I think the spirit of the conversation appears to be that the general consensus on AI implementation throughout the public sector is broadly through an intergovernmental rather than a separate ministerial approach and task forces. And I probably won't be very creative in here, because this is exactly the model we've been following, the path that we've been pursuing as throughout the Polish public sector. There are about 96 central institutions, about 2,500 local ones. And that's not counting many agencies that are sort of semi-public and broadly independent. So in total, we're talking about millions of people effectively communicating. And the only way to coordinate this effectively and being sort of thorough in progress monitoring, exploring synergies, and all those things that really make for a successful implementation. The only way to do this really appears to be through a very sort of high-level engaging dialogue throughout the institutions engaged. So in our case, there is a strategy set out by the government. It's been a very long consultative process. It's took about a year or so. Then the entities tasked with this, there is a minister that's responsible for this. However, the broad aim is that every institution has their own set of actions and goals targeted by the strategy, and then it's all coordinated with a special cross-ministerial, cross-governmental task force operating in the Prime Minister's office. So there's really sort of there's really an approach of this is a very special case, right? It's not another policy. It's not something that affects only one ministry, only one institution, only one entity. It's something that really applies to everyone, and it's one of the very few things that I can actually imagine, and the other ones being sort of crisis management committees. But it's the only one, except for those, that is sort of given this sort of treatment. And the only reason for this is because we treat the public sector, however massive it may be, as more of an enabler towards everyone else in the society to really be sort of this driving force of innovation. We're the ones who are supposed to not do any significant harm to this. We're supposed to be the ones to make sure that they have all the circumstances to conduct their innovative activities. And in order to do this, we need literally everyone on board, because every single business decision is somehow attached to a multitude of government fields. So I think this is really sort of heartening that there is this sort of approach is generally sort of more or less universal across our partner countries, and we'll be very happy to work with them as well on sort of things that I think that differ. But generally, I think this approach is sort of universal.
Great, thank you, Anthony. And I think you very rightly highlighted how AI uptake in public sector is one thing, but obviously the government has a double responsibility to also make sure that there is an uptake in the broader economy. And the recent Commission DAISY survey run every year, it's indicating that the average European AI uptake is currently gravitating around 8%. And Soren was mentioning before that in the digital decade targets, we have a 75% target to be achieved. So I think collectively, and we will talk also about collaborations, public-private partnerships, we have a lot of work to do to propel from 8 to 75%. So now we heard a little bit about the national strategies. We heard about the focus of the Commission on interoperability. I would like now to come to you, Florian, and could you help us understand a little bit more about the role of ECMWF? And you're at the forefront of this technology with your center. And so we would love to hear from you. How do you use AI and what is your perspective?
Thank you, Irina. So I'm obviously from the European Weather Centre, so I breathe weather and climate. That's what we're here for. We're trying to deliver the best service to our member states in general, the national hydrological and meteorological services in that. So you already heard in the previous speech how important AI has become in weather and how it seems to revolutionize an entire industry, and how important data are in that. And when we talk about interoperability and connectivity, well, weather doesn't know any borders. It doesn't really care what's underneath it. So collecting data across borders has always been part of us, and so we are governed by UN organizations such as WMO. But I really have to applaud the Commission here too, because particularly in the space of machine learning and AI, they have been really enabling this revolution. And this may be through different things. This may be DG DEFIS through the Copernicus program, where we generate massively and hugely valuable data to do weather forecasts or climate predictions for the future. This is DG Connect, and I know you have a speaker later on about it, who has really seen this vision through the Destination Earth program to sort of accelerate machine learning beyond what can be done now, and really enabling us to hopefully build a European model of weather forecasting and become at the forefront. These data sets are really important, and I'm really grateful for the Commission to supporting the European Centre in providing those data sets across for everybody to use. And that may be small businesses, this are large businesses, these are government organizations, these are decision makers. It's really the entire value chain for that. So the value of weather forecasting has really driven the interest in this topic, and machine learning has become a really dominant source of innovation there. And I think there's going to be the next year, we're going to hear even more about this. And we are in a truly exciting time at the moment.
Great, thank you, Florian, to bring your perspective. And going now to you, Jeppe. So we heard from governments, we heard from an international body, we heard from the Commission. What is the perspective of industry? What are the latest really groundbreaking innovations that you see in the applications as well? And what are the challenges that you are facing in integrating those new solutions?
Yeah, thank you, Irina, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. And I think your I want to congratulate the panel on the comments. I think they're all very, very relevant. And I think we are at the cusp of another digital revolution that will last for potentially a decade. And I think we all have to come to the realization that artificial intelligence, and in particular generative AI, will change the ways we live and work. I think when listening to my colleague Soren Karan delivering the keynote before, he was talking about which sectors were driving and where are we really seeing the biggest and the fastest uptake. And I think healthcare is one of these sectors where we are seeing most dramatic and most rapid uptake, and we're also seeing and identifying the use cases that make a difference, not just to enterprises or public government, but also to us as human beings. And ultimately, the goal must be to improve the life of humankind. And I think this type of technology, particularly in healthcare, is going to give us a lot of those capabilities. And we talk a lot about medical imaging for diagnosis. We talk a lot about fast forwarding the resolution time to give patients a diagnosis. We talk a lot about drug discovery, of course. How fast can we improve the rate of drug discovery? We saw an incredible pace around COVID-19, around drug discovery as well. We talk around patient planning, therapy planning. So all around therapy planning, individual therapy planning for patients in healthcare. And then, of course, we can also turn to more common day tasks like the hospital workflows and everything around virtual assistants, helping nurses and doctors simply to be more efficient in their everyday work. And when we talk about virtual assistants and all of these capabilities that we see in generative AI and their abilities to help us write drafts or analyze data, this is really the time saver that I think many people will benefit from first. And this will also, of course, be very relevant in government and administration.
Great, thank you, Jeppe. And indeed, again, lots of benefits. Healthcare could be one that has the easiest to understand of those. And indeed, so since we're now already talking about some practical examples, it might be a good moment, maybe Elsa, to ask you to walk us through the pilot that you are doing at AMA with your chatbot. So we understand it's a pilot, but it would be very interesting to already hear what is the response, how does this work, and what kind of efficiencies you're planning to drive with it.
Yes, so we have a pilot, our virtual assistant, a pilot for public services. It was launched last May. It does not have a name, it's on purposes, but it is an innovative AI solution for the Portuguese public sector. It's a first project with AI, a virtual assistant running on AI with an AI solution. It's the first pilot in the Portuguese public sector, and its purpose is to guide citizens in their digital interaction with public services, making use of voice and natural language processing coupled with an interactive avatar. And this virtual assistant ensures 24/7 customer service to citizens, giving information about the digital mobile key. It's the first service that we have on this pilot, and it's easily accessed by any device with an internet connection. The solution is based on the same model that powers OpenAI's ChatGPT, and it is capable, and this is revolutionary because it is capable of recognizing voice and text in Portuguese, responding through both voice and text. These tools enable searching the knowledge base of the digital mobile key and presenting a realistic avatar speech with synchronized mouth movements. Our virtual assistant with an avatar, it's a collaborative work. It is the result of a collaboration between AMA and various private entities. Microsoft was our partner. Defined AI was responsible for developing the optimized voice model for Portuguese. and collaborated with a startup specialized in artificial intelligence, which managed their data, which managed the integration and implementation of the pilots. The end goal of this pilot, which AME is already working, is to extend the knowledge base to most of public services in Portugal. We started with a pilot with one service, information about digital mobile key, and we are already now developing the second phase of the project, increasing the knowledge base to information about other public services in Portugal. And this new version will feature a completely revised user experience and will be able to interact in over 20 languages. So we can address the needs of citizens from other countries who need Portuguese public services. And up to now, we have over 20,000 conversations with the virtual assistant. And it have contributed to supporting citizens in real time for services associated with a digital mobile key. And we have also registered a significant increase regarding digital mobile key activations compared to last year. We saw about 40% more activations. And the assistant may not be the only reason for this, but it sure had an impact by making information available in a simple and innovative way.
Great, congratulations. That sounds really great. And I mean, an uptake of public sector services of this specific service by 40%. I mean, it's again another proof that this kind of AI tools will actually help us drastically in this journey of digitization of public sector. And also noteworthy that this will be available in 20 languages. So also that I thought was pretty interesting. Moving maybe, transitioning to you, Wouter. So the Dutch government has also quite a few initiatives in place, the Dutch AI Coalition, and you also have developed an implementation toolbox for innovative technologies that I thought would be quite interesting. Again, we have a very international audience here with us today, so I thought it's quite interesting to hear the various examples that the governments are developing.
Well, but let me first make this more into let's say also a conversation and react to what Elsa is saying, because I think it's very interesting what Portugal is doing there, and I really I think in Europe we must support the countries taking steps forward and look at how we can cooperate and look at best practices. I think when you look at the concept of virtual assistants in public service providing, we're seeing that there's a stronger demand when citizens get innovative service in the private sector to get the same level of services in public sector. And if you have one-stop shops in private sector applications, we see this with the Interoperable Europe program. We see it with the SDG. We see it now with the programs of the once only principle and the ID wallet. The move towards citizen-centered service is very strong. It's going to be stronger in public sector. And AI has a strong role to perform there because citizens want to be in control of their data, want to have data informed services. And an example of what we're doing in the Netherlands is we're looking at proactive service providing. So we have a whole program with proactive service providing so that you don't have to knock on the door of government to say, I want to be eligible for certain allowances, or I have an extra child and I want these allowances or these extra services because I have a special situation. It's proactive, based on data coming from different sectors, from education, healthcare, housing, and social security. That's one of the programs we're looking at now. The thing you asked me about the Dutch AI Coalition is, I think it's interesting. The Netherlands is 50% underwater, so we need to cooperate, otherwise we'll drown. That's what we're famous for, I think. So what we did with AI is we formed this AI Coalition, which is a platform for industry, like large companies and startups, governments, NGOs, and science, to have a platform to discuss societal issues in, I think, 11 working groups, like education, healthcare, defense, public services, and discuss shared goals, but also shared challenges. What we also do is when governments invest, for example, now we have a several $100 million euro investment in an Netherlands AI program, we discuss it with these multi-level stakeholders, with these NGOs, these companies, because we are convinced that we need private sector and science buy-in, and it can't be a governmental direction only, because we don't have the knowledge, we don't have the speed, we don't have the scientific background. And one last point, sorry, the Dutch are known for talking too much, excuse me. The next point is, when we talk about implementation, is that I just discussed that we can't hold this back. So I think our strategy should be based on guardrails. When cars were discovered, we created more safer ways to drive with cars. We didn't ban them because we had horses. So what we're working on is guardrails. And what we did is we formed an implementation guidelines for public officials to work responsibly with AI. And this is mostly based on the workings of developers, operators, system integrators. So they have a huge cohesive set of what should I take into account when implementing this? Because we see a lot of confusion and skepticism, and sometimes even unknown regulations holding people back when they want to innovate. A next step, this will be my last point, is we're looking at the concept of an AI validation team that actually benchmarks large language models on the basis of existing regulations. So it is open to see what regulations or guidelines are endangered by the use of certain models and less endangered by the use of other models. This is something we're looking at, but benchmarking, setting open implementation guidelines, I think that helps to, let's say, guide this transition in the right direction we want to have.
Great. No, very interesting. And also the proactive service provisioning. I thought this from a societal perspective, it's a very interesting concept. And Anthony, any comments from you? You also have a leading role in GovTech. So any perspective from your side?
Well, of course, and then without you said something about the Dutch. I think the Poles are known for never letting up an opportunity to speak. So that's something I will say. But no, in all honesty, I would say that I think much has been said about AI-driven tools, and I could go on a tangent about what we've built. However, something that I think have to stress here is that what we're doing is focusing on sort of two parts of the process. Like, one thing is the product, which is great. It's super important and has to be very thoroughly approached and designed. But what we've discovered also, coming back to what I said before about this sort of our role as an enabler and sort of this like first stone in an avalanche sort of kind of approach, is that we're also looking on those sort of community-driven AI processes. And I came to the public sector in 2017. I was in the Ministry of Finance, responsible for many things related to this. And something we discovered was that we had our IT teams, we had our people who were pretty smart, who were capable of building nice tools, but this wasn't really enough. The thing that we really needed and wanted was to sort of have a streamlined way of engaging other stakeholders, who, be it companies, be it third-party organizations, be it some sort of research teams, be it even sort of ragtag groups of students who actually built something, because this was back then when there was no one way, one solution, one answer, right? So what we did, and I know it's, we've looked at what other tools are being used, and what we stumbled up are, one of the first things that come up are, of course, those events and hackathons, those kind of marathon design sessions. And we've decided to sort of crank it up all the way to 11 to sort of make it this but bigger. And as things stand, we've concluded our 6th edition, I think. It was 2 months ago, of the Europe's largest hackathon, stationary hackathon, being held in Poland for the last 6 years running, with some break on for the pandemic, of course, because that was a nightmare. But other than this, this sort of energy of community-driven solutions and public-driven problems build the sort of synergy that allows us not to just think about the products we need, but to just come up with needs and challenges and sort of leave it from there, right? Sort of now it's the job of those guys to come up with an actual technical working solution. And at first there was one public institution in there, then there was two, then there was two again, I think, and now there are, I think, 15. So this, and then there are local editions and all this. I don't think there's time for this, but my point being, the projects themselves are super important, but I think that our job as the Prime Minister's office, as the Ministry of Education and Science, is to sort of design processes that allow those sort of synergies to be semi-automatic, right? So this to be readily available to be used, to create legal certainty for this, to be let's say engage, motivate entities to participate. And I think those processes, we've also dealt with procurement, those very, very niche sort of areas of how to order something in this mode and so on. We've engaged with the Commission on this, we've engaged with everyone who cares about procurement stuff. And the idea was to build something that does not require our input in designing and streamlining and proceeding. It's more of, here is a toolkit that you can actually use whenever you have a problem that can be solved with digital technologies. And that's sort of based on hackathon, based on context, based on procurement, based on some special legal things, based on funding, of course. We've developed this sort of toolkit and given it to public institutions and said, here, if you have a digital need, if you have a problem that can be solved with technologies, including AI, especially AI, here is what you can do. Pick and choose. Here is your menu. And I think that this has worked really tremendously well for us. It's been the engagement of institutions themselves has been enormous, because they themselves were solving their own problems. And I think this was sort of the main driving force of them being actually willing to engage and change, because we didn't come up with their problems for them. We gave them tools to actually solve their problems.
That's great. That's very interesting as an approach, Anthony. Indeed, as you say, so central government is not giving all the answers, but is basically giving the tools to find your own answers, since especially when you have such a distributed public sector infrastructure, basically, and systems. Thank you for that. And indeed, so we spoke a lot about benefits of AI use cases. Let's talk a little bit about technology. And Florian, maybe I would call upon you to comment on whether, from an infrastructure perspective, did you have to make any adaptations, upgrades, when you basically started very intensively to use AI models?
So it's a good question, and we did have to make adaptations in terms of what type of chips we have. We had to increase the number of GPUs or equivalents in order to actually do our model optimization. Having said that, I have to say that the EuroHPC's infrastructure was, of course, provided or is available in Europe, does actually have already very good provisions in terms of training those type of models or using those type of models in terms of forecasting mode. At the European Center, we've also created, of course, our in-house infrastructures. That's mainly for securing our high reliable forecasts. So we've got something called the European Weather Cloud, pun is in the name, which is really there to sort of provide an operational 24/7 service. And we do this together with our sister or brother organization, which is EUMETSAT in that sense. So we did have to make adaptations. And of course, as probably everybody else across Europe, we're currently desperate for more compute facilities, particular GPUs, in order to optimize our models. I'm pretty sure I'm talking here for absolutely everybody. And this desperation has led us, of course, of trying to make our models more optimal. Sometimes the resource limitation is actually also a bit of a blessing. But it does really hint to probably what the biggest bottleneck at the moment is. We do have data. We need to ensure that the compute is next to the data. So we are dealing with very large data, which sort of is an additional challenge. And there's a few avenues there. I mentioned the Euro HPCs. There's some national compute capabilities which are really excellent. And then, of course, we all run our own supercomputer to do so, but all of them had to be adapted to some extent.
Great, thank you. And indeed, the challenges for compute are, I guess, a very painful subject across several geographies. Maybe transitioning now to the data question. So obviously, we need incredibly large data sets. And here, my question is the following, and for you also obviously to the broader panel. But Andrea, so the Commission has done in this term incredible progress with the European data spaces, and considering that now, as we heard, we need incredibly large data sets to nourish and train the AI models, has the time arrived to maybe start considering what is next? So should we start thinking about interconnecting the European data spaces?
Indeed, what I think is happening, as you know, is the idea was to, at one point, create a common European data space. And the way we've approached this is trying to do that by sectorial approaches and use cases in different sectors. What we have been, at least from our end, doing is identifying already existing solutions that can foster interoperability within a data space. And obviously, in our domain, we've had already quite a number of, for example, semantic interoperability solutions, but also different kinds of building blocks that I think some of you have referred to earlier, that could help some of those data spaces, especially those that, for example, would serve the public sector. And what we have foreseen is that if these interoperability solutions are used within a single data space, that will inherently foster or facilitate the interconnection of data spaces. We see that already. If I think about, for example, the Green Deal data space, which is inherently bringing together data from many different sectors, or even the smart cities data space, which is in a local context, obviously cross-domain by default. But we're seeing more and more of those. And I believe that this is going to be the next big phase for the data spaces, to actually put them into use and try to see how these can be interconnected. And for the public sector, that's going to be extremely beneficial, not only to create more user-centric and even personalized services, and then use the power of AI to actually bring those, like Walter was saying, proactively to the citizen at the place, at the time that they exactly need it. But also, like Florian, you're doing at a much larger scale, but really for example, local administrations, but also governments, to make those decisions based on those data sets that have been shared. And in this case, obviously, not just public sector data space, but maybe the citizens' data, private sector shared in a secure context, immediately cross-domain, cross-border, and so on. So these we believe are extremely promising times for public administrations to benefit from these data spaces.
Absolutely. And Florian, can you tell us about your data exchanges practices? Because obviously in the weather forecasting industry, data exchange is critical, and you clearly had to do it ante litteram. And now the Commission is leading the charge on great progress across all industries. But could you tell us a little bit about your industry, so to speak?
Yeah, I said already before that I think it's a good question. I said before that weather doesn't know any borders. In order for us to actually operate a global forecast, we do need data from across the globe, beyond Europe. If you want to know what the weather is in Europe, you will need data from the US, or beyond that even. So we've always exchanged data and made data interoperable, particular data which are used for weather forecasting. And for us, the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization, sets some standards, or sets the standards in that area, and we exchange data across that. There's of course many new challenges, and I think this is where DG Digit comes in, and what Andrea said is very important. We've got many new data sources such as IoT data and so forth, which come with new challenges and new ideas how we exchange them, and that's where what Andrea said is quite important in that sense.
Great, and Jeppe, what's your perspective? So, are there other avenues possible for data sharing, or are we still thinking in technology that centralization eventually could be the answer, or are we looking also at other models?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and thank you, Irina. I think it's important to keep in mind, and I think this has been mentioned several times, that we don't just need data. We need high quality data. We need extremely high quality data, because it is really it is the old rule of crap in, crap out. If we do not have high quality data, we will not have high quality model, and the models will essentially be useless. So some of the concerns that we have been discussing with customers, of course, is that will we see regulations that will limit the quality of the data? So will we have to adhere to regulations that will degrade the quality of the data that can be used for training our models? So one of the solutions that we've been working on, and this is a technology that we've commonly shared over the recent years, is called swarm learning, where we are actually not sharing the data. We can leave the data in place, but we can share the learnings, the findings, the weights that come from that data. We can share that across entities, so that we do not have to share the data. We can just share the sort of the insight that data can bring. And that may be a potential technological solution to ensuring high quality data, but still keeping data sovereign to governments, to states, to entities.
This is a very interesting concept, and actually leads me to my perfectly to my next question. What about sovereignty in AI? So, and I would ask any of you that would like to comment on this. So, is sovereignty a topic for AI ecosystems, and what are the considerations that you believe are critically important from that perspective? Whoever wants to go. Anyone? Any thoughts?
I'm happy to pitch in, but Andrea already unmuted. Maybe she's first.
No, obviously, it is a topic of discussion, as you know. For example, in the funding mechanism through the Digital Europe program, there are certain rules to be respected when it comes to working with data and AI systems. And I think in general, what we've been looking at is helping member states implement AI that is human-centric and value-driven, based on those value structures and systems that have been developed in different contexts, such as in the context of the AI Act, as I said earlier, the Berlin Declaration, how to use human-centric emerging technologies for the public sector. What we've done here, and I think that's an interesting approach, is working with the procurement colleagues and developing a set of procurement clauses, by the way, coming from the Netherlands and Finland, and then actually scaling it up now to many public administrations. Using these procurement clauses would ensure alignment with the AI Act. And so these have now been translated into different languages, and that ensures that at least, those are respecting the rules that the AI Act will put forward, the risk-based approach and human-centric approach. We also have seen that, with this value-driven approach, there is also a need for transparency, again coming from the Netherlands and Finland, but it's again now been put into an actual standard, so-called transparency registers, where citizens can see, which of the services are actually using AI in their context, and so that is something that ensures explainability, accountability, and traceability, and obviously, the creation of a Euro HPC and managing the data within our continent is another approach for that.
Great. Florian, any thoughts?
No, sort of just a reflection, sort of trying to illustrate, I think, what was just said. And of course, I deal in weather forecasting and weather warnings, traceability, accountability, and sovereignty of the nations themselves is hugely important there. We can't have those warnings issued by a non-responsible, by an entity which is less accountable than maybe it should be in that sense. So this is a huge topic for us. It's really important that we empower our member states and our national hydrometeorological services to deliver the service they're designed to do and they are instructed to do by their governments. So for me, this topic is actually key. I think I'm handing over to Wouter, who's nodding.
Oh, I was nodding because I thought it was a good point. What I wanted to say about sovereignty is that, but it's a hype term in technology. I've worked a long time on the term of self-sovereign identity, and it is in essence, I think, about not having to being in control and having as least dependencies as possible on entities governing over you. And what is complex about this AI implementation is that the demands for transparency will be more and more complex to organize. The complexer the models are we're using. So from input to model handling and output, we're seeing that the transparency demands we used to have for systems we use for important decisions in society are very hard to apply to when these vendors organize themselves. When it comes to the Netherlands, we have strong relation on citizen data or other high sensitive data that it must be stored on site in our country. We actually have 4 data centers in the country, which even by law are stated that those should be the data centers handling citizen data. But this is about storage. But when it is about compute and handling data, we're seeing that the difference between what we're working on in the public sector and what is offered in the market now is growing. And that is something that worries me when this gap is growing and we are having, let's say, demands from the compute power we had before, and we're putting that on the compute power we're working on now, because I'm not sure we're going to have enough with simply relying on, okay, we need transparency. That's why the AI Act is so complicated now at the moment. This balance between innovation on the one hand, but also geopolitical sensitivities coming in, and really geopolitical dependencies that need to be handled on the highest political level and should not be simply technical people questions.
Thank you, Wouter, and I can't agree more that that sovereignty is today a geopolitical question, and that's also why, excuse me, we see so many sensitivities around compute capacity, where it can be deployed, and with some restrictions that start arising in some parts of the globe. So with that, we reached the top of the hour allocated for our panel today. I would like to really warmly thank all of you. You have all done a fantastic job in helping our audience better understand what are the opportunities in government, what are your plans, and again, thank you to the 3 governments that we had represented on the panel today. And hopefully, this session was insightful to unpack one of the 3 dimensions of AI, as Commissioner Breton put it. We tackle data, and we'll have a short break for 5 minutes, and then we'll reconvene to tackle the compute issue. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in 5 minutes.